Terrific. I think Tim is somewhere and will be joining. I want to begin, so we're going to be talking about AI coaching. And so I think, we'll start with the coaching bit and the investment in managers and why it is so important to make investments in managers. So we'll just do a quick go around to understand how you and your companies are thinking about that use case. And Lesley, I will start with you because as far as I know, you have the most exciting news that's fresh off the press. So do you want to share with the room what that news is? And I think it fits in nicely with this coaching theme.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say it out loud. I've been saying it out loud all morning. We just found out this morning that we're in the top 25 places to work, great places to work in the world. So the top 25, just found that out. And it feels good because our philosophy is about people first. And so it feels like the right reward for being a people-first organization. So if your question is about why would we invest in something like coaching, I guess it's just because we know the potential that coaching has to unlock performance. It unlocks performance and it unlocks human potential. And why not give that to everybody? Our job is to unlock performance and potential. And yet, we've given it historically to such small groups of people. It's been cost restrictive, it's been time restrictive, and it's been based on that really messy human relationship thing. So if you can find another way of doing that, then why not?
And Jennifer?
Yes, hi. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think just to build off what you had just said, when we built the business case at Analog, I immediately went to equipping managers. And then I thought to myself, am I doing an actual disservice by thinking in that narrow of a business case? Because when you look at the representation of our management, they're largely heavily based in North America, largely a male audience, et cetera. So we widened our business case to actually have 40% managers, 60% individual contributors, and I'm very happy to say the invitee list had 50-50 gender representation in it. So I think it's really important, and we're going to study not only the adoption patterns, and I have a little bit more data to share about the adoption patterns, but also longitudinally understand how performance is being impacted and so forth. So something I would say to all the talent leaders in the room, when you are thinking about your early adoption use cases, make sure you're not thinking too narrow of a view. Democratize access to these types of products because we do believe very wholeheartedly that it will ultimately help improve individuals' performance and the performance of the company. And I think we all have a really deep responsibility to think very broadly about how we are inviting people to be early adopters in these things.
And Tim, how about you? At Delta, what's the business case for investing in leaders and managers?
Well, for us, the front line where employees engage with our customers, that's where it's all won. And we put a great deal of effort in making sure that those experiences are phenomenal. We want to make certain that the employee experience ultimately drives the customer experience. So for us, it's really self-evident. We've got to really focus on making sure that those managers and our frontline leaders are delivering those moments that delight our customers.
Wonderful. And so Jennifer, you're briefly mentioning sort of your pilot. So I know that you're just in the design phases, but you've done a really thoughtful job, as you said, about who are the right people, and you want to set that up so you can measure ROI, you can measure uptake, usage, feedback. Can you share a little bit more about how you designed that with the room today?
Sure, and I'll tell you exactly how I was thinking about it. When you make assumptions, did your mother ever tell you when you make an assumption, it makes an ass out of you and me, okay? So I thought we can't make assumptions. So instead of being an ass, why don't we ask? And we really were trying to be thoughtful, and I did make a mistake. I did make an ass out of myself by, in some of our early pilots, we just gave it to people, like gave generative AI tools to people. And crazy, some people didn't want it. There was no parade being thrown for the generative AI product that we just kind of shoved their, shoved down their throats. So with Nadia, what we're doing instead, and I really recommend anybody do this, is you invite with a very delightful proposition, and then you allow people to opt in and opt out. And so what we found is we had 1,600 people opt in. It's about half of who we invited. Of that about half responded. About 81% said they'd love to. About 18%, 19% said they did not. Okay? But I now know why they did not. They also said the reason they opted out is they didn't have time. Now, I don't know if I believe them in that, because I also kind of embedded another research question in the mix. They also said only 40% of them agreed that they're confident in their ability to use AI tools. So do they not have time, or are they more reticent because they're not sure? And that tells me a lot about adoption. There's going to be people who are more a passenger than a pilot on the plane. Who are those passengers, and how do we give them both the optimism that it can improve productivity and quality, and the agency that they can do this, that they can be effective?
And was there a difference in the percent who were confident in their use of AI for those who accepted?
Yeah, it was crazy. Okay, get a load of this. So the people who opted in, 75% of them agreed with the statement that I have confidence that I can use this thing. The people who opted out only agreed that they have confidence in their ability 40% of the time.
So that's quite the jump. So it's probably a pretty good explanatory variable, with time being the excuse. And I think this is what we're going to see, story after story. It is not everyone is going to adopt it with the same level of enthusiasm, and the thoughtfulness with which we design these rollout programs is crucial. Lesley, you've had a chance now, I think you're in sort of month 6 or month 7 of the rollout of Nadia in Experian. Can you share a little bit more about how you designed, I think, a very thoughtful, curated experience for people who are using her as a coach?
Sure. Actually, it's a bit longer than that, Parker. We're almost coming up to a year of our first experiment. We roll everything out through a series of experiments. That's the way we design products. That's the way we design HR product as well. So it's really natural to just go for a series of experiments. So our first experiment was, I'm going to call it Vanilla Nadia, which was putting out there the coaching solution. We had 100% take-up from the first experiment group within the first 3 hours of extending the invitation. It's the dream of us learning and development people. It's never happened before. But less repeat take-up. So we were wondering why, and one of the problem statements was about, does it feel relevant to me in my organization and my job? So experiment 2, we trained Nadia on our own characteristics of leadership, on our own philosophies and leadership content. Then we started to see the repeat use as well as the immediate take-up. Experiment 3, we have our engagement surveys. What happens when our engagement surveys come out? How do our managers get to use that? Just a shout out for my brilliant colleague, Brad, who's in the audience, who runs our engagement surveys and said, we need Nadia to sit with a manager and explain and talk and coach on, and what are the next steps. Then we did the same with performance management. So can you imagine, you're about to do a performance conversation. You can role play it verbally. So that was the next experiment. And that's when we started to get really strong ROI. So one of the main measures of this is, do we see an increase in leader effectiveness on Great Place to Work? And yes, the answer is it's a 5% uptick in leadership effectiveness on the people who use Nadia, who don't use Nadia. And our last experiment is a program offering for all middle managers, the kind of leadership stuff you need to do on a day-to-day basis. The whole program will be based on Nadia.
I want to double-click on that in a moment, but Tim, I know we're earlier on in our journey, but one of the things that has come up in the conversations you and I have had is you're looking at a range of technology options. You're looking at internal, external, current vendors, new potential partners. So you scanned the landscape. What was it that caught your eye about Nadia as Delta began their initial trial and now deployment?
Sure. Well, I think as Bill had mentioned very early on, there's only so much capital that goes around, and you need to be able to create a competitive position and explain the value of AI. So I can share with your audience sort of how we got our leaders to understand this, and then where sort of Nadia and the Valence tool kind of fit into our model. So it started with having to explain this ML AI thing that you did at the very beginning there. It was like, hey, Tim, you know, didn't seem like that long ago. We're describing everything as ML and AI. Now it's just AI. What happened to the whole ML thing, and how is this different than that? So at Delta, we've been using machine learning for quite a long time, for fuel management, even for weather prediction. And in that case, it's, if you can imagine like an XY graph with a slope on it, and you've got a couple points on it, and you can change the value of those points and change the slope to find a better prediction. And you can explain why it is that that particular point changed. You moved it this percentage, and the prediction quality got better. You can update that information real time with Internet of Things. So we've been doing that sort of thing for a very long time. What this is fundamentally different with generative AI and the use of these neural networks that can learn. And in ways that makes explainability a little bit difficult sometimes. So the first thing was just kind of explain that, just like you did for your audience here. And then what we did is we took this idea of learning and its ability to learn. You know, Lesley, as you'd mentioned, grounding it in your own information. We went down a similar sort of path. But we explained the process. We created 4 categories of this generative AI learning sort of use case scenarios. And the first one was really focused on things you could do very quickly and add value. And you could say, hey, look, we're doing some stuff in generative, but it doesn't know you. It doesn't really understand the organization. And then in the 4th category, you have stuff that knows you very, very, very well. So we'll talk about that in a second. So the first category, we found there were lots of our existing vendors that you could flip a switch, configure it, and turn it on in your existing environment. And you could check the box that you've done something in AI. The value of it is questionable. It doesn't really know your enterprise. It doesn't understand the context of your business. And really what's happening in a lot of those applications, they're just making calls out to these big frontier models that have been trained on Reddit and so forth. But you could do them very quickly and very easily oftentimes, but the value is minimal. The next category is where you can actually ground it in the information of your organization. You can do it relatively quickly. The work that we've done with Valence, I think it was a couple months maybe from the very first time we had a conversation to the point we had employees in there using it and evaluating it. We put them through Qualtrics that could evaluate the experience and so forth. But this category is where it starts to get grounded in the information of your organization. The next category is really more sophisticated. We're really doing some of those things internally right now where the model is actually being trained on the data trained. So we're using Delta IT and we're building some things, and there's some opportunities for us to work together down the road. And I know you guys got a great direction you're heading in that space as well. And then the final category is stuff that we don't really have anything anywhere in Delta right now, but the most cutting edge technology that you're seeing with these reasoning models and compound AI, where you have smaller models working together to solve big problems at the enterprise level with agent-based technology and all those sorts of things. That is an extraordinary realm, particularly as the cost of silicon goes down, the compute value gets better and better. So that's kind of how we set it up. We said AI, ML. We're going over it here, MI, with generative AI. Here are the categories, and Valence sits right in there. It's like great value, quick to implement, grounded in your enterprise context, and it made it real simple for us.
You know, one of the themes that I think I'm hearing from the 3 of you and from other conversations is that there will be a multiplicity of solutions. There is no one solution. It's important, I think, as Bill said, to have a portfolio of options. Jennifer and Lesley, I know both of you have really thought about how Nadia as a solution will coexist with Microsoft Copilot. And Jennifer, you've got some data that you've already sort of found in the early days. Can you share more about how you've shared Copilot and the uptake there and the use case, and then how you see the link with AI coaching?
Sure. So, Park and I have also talked about, oh, Jennifer, you've been using generative AI for so long. Well, so long when you think about, we're here in November. Just to remind everybody, November 30th, 2022 was when ChatGPT was released. A few days after that, I got in there, and it helped me write, while I was at IBM, my team's performance reviews. Then, November 6th of 2023, ChatGPT released the ability for people like us to create GPTs, our own little agents. So a year after that, I created a GPT to write performance reviews, and I shared it with my executive leadership team. I said, hey, it's just for us. Try it out. What did you think? The feedback they gave me was, you're too nice. Your feedback assistant is too glowing in their, their language, funny enough. And now, this past October, so that's 3 cycles, in 3 weeks, I worked with our teams to create a Copilot Studio GPT that we put into Workday. Now, when you think about that hockey stick that Brent was talking about earlier today, a use case of 1 just helping me, a use case of maybe 6 people just helping 6 people. In that period of time, we had 22,000 engagements with employees writing their self-input and setting goals. That was in the last month. Interestingly enough, because I remember I never make an ass out of myself, I always ask, I asked those people who were using the writing assistant, think about how long it would normally take you to sit down and do the dreaded task of reflecting on your annual contributions and setting your goals. How much time did that thing save you that we just produced in 3 weeks? I was floored that 45% of the people said it saved them about half the time. They got it done in half the time. I was even more surprised that 31% said it saved them 75% of the time. But you asked me to say, how did this relate back to Nadia? I can track that we now, because those people kind of sampled a writing assistant and began to use it, they're some of the highest adoption and opt-in of Nadia just a few weeks later. So my hypothesis is the more we introduce these experiments and we get people more optimistic and more confident in their ability to use these things and to see value, they're going to be more and more and more willing to try and reap the benefits that we know that Nadia can provide to them. But we have to get over this mindset issue that we have of it's either, one of my, again, I love the comments that come through because I don't just ask them, statistical questions. I ask them, what else do you want to know? One person who doesn't want to use a writing assistant or a coach said that they don't like the BS bingo generator of AI. Another person doesn't like Nadia because it's her ex-husband's girlfriend's name. So I get all kinds of insights from the comments. But you have to listen and really understand what is it that is getting in people's way. But I'm just thrilled to say, as we do these little micro experiments, we're helping people save time and improving quality, but getting them more ready for what's next. Because I think that's what all of us as talent leaders are responsible for doing, preparing people. And for some ways, protecting them as well, right? We're building up this muscle, and all these little experiments are helping us get them into shape, whether they want to go to the gym or not, right? We're helping them do the reps.
And it's so crucial with the speed, the exponential speed that you talked about to get them, starting now, because at some point it might just become too much, too overwhelming to get them started. Lesley, I know that, when Nadia was rolled out, it was pre-Copilot, but now Copilot coexists with Nadia. What are some of the lessons that you've drawn from that experience?
Well, actually, I'm just going to, Jennifer, such an interesting example. So maybe phase 4 of that example is actually Nadia role-playing performance conversations, which is what we're experimenting with now, which is something that, big fan of Microsoft Copilot, works fantastically for the kind of example you've just given. It can't right now role play and give feedback, But unleashing that power, now all we've done at the moment is give that to leaders to do that. It's really changed the quality of the performance conversation. The next step is to give it to all employees. So I think using Jennifer's is just a great example, actually.
Tim, you've got a huge frontline workforce. This is a frontline workforce that is probably not as familiar with technology as the HQ workers. How does Delta think about ensuring that both parts of the workforce have access to this technology that could be transformative?
Yeah, well, all the technology that we develop, we really start there and engaging where employees can connect back to the organization, so that whether that's obviously with the front line, it's mobile technology. So we're very focused on making certain that their voices are heard, particularly in the early stages when we're designing these solutions. I mentioned earlier when we did the pilot with you all, we had, see that I said you all. I'm actually from New York. I moved down there 6 years ago, and now I've got the you all thing. But they are included in the early design phases. So we implemented Qualtrics for all the measuring pieces. So we got to hear all the verbatims and then fine tune it and improve it more. So really everything, 90% of our entire workforce is out there engaging with customers. So it really is at the heart of all we do.
And Jennifer, as you think of, you've been using AI sort of personally for a while. You've experienced some of the change in capabilities. If you try to picture yourself in analog devices maybe 12 months in the future, what are some of the hopeful use cases that you could imagine emerging?
Well, I think when I think about the outcomes of the goals, like let's set the intention. One outcome, I hope, is that we see a direct correlation to increased business performance and revenue growth as a result of this. Because, when you think about this passenger versus pilot mindset, one study that was done by Jeff Hancock from Stanford's social media lab and Better Up Labs as well, they looked at across a population of 10,000 workers, 18 industries. And they found those people with a pilot mindset, that high optimism, high agency, were 3.6 times more productive. Now, I got to trust Stanford. They know what they're doing. I wonder now how they calculated that productivity measurement, but let's say it's more right than wrong. If we can introduce 12 months from now and help people get into that upper right-hand quadrant, right, of pilot mindset, productivity increases, innovation is unlocked, collaboration with AI also will foster creativity with their colleagues. And I have to believe that that's going to improve revenue growth because it's going to improve, performance. And hopefully include engagement and make it a best place to work. So I think if we really harness this right, we're going to get people prepared, we're going to make more pilots, and we're going to be more profitable.
Lesley, the last example that you shared was around the integration into a leadership program. And I think that's a new use case where we've only worked really with you and Brad and Sophie and many people closely on this. Can you share more about the idea behind it and just the early stages of the sort of the genesis so far?
Yeah, actually, and I've only just realized this in that last question you asked and Jennifer's response, actually, on the problem statement. And I think one of the opportunities, the problem statement is about the problem of humanness. And rather than worry about how AI can cause issues to take away our humanness, how instead does it help us solve the problems that come with humanness? So what it's been making me think is that, the biases that we all carry around with us in the people processes, in our people decision making, that bit about, it all comes together when we have conversations, when managers meet. How many times of HR professionals have we said, or have I said, oh, if only the leaders would? This is all about the leaders and their relationship too. Well, does AI have a space in there to intervene in that relationship, or to actually take away some of the bias in that human-to-human relationship? We're running a big leadership program next week, which is still face-to-face, so that ability to have retreats is still important. And on the plane over, I was going back and rereading Thinking Fast and Slow. So it's really got me thinking about this first order thinking and how do we get the hell out of that. And that, I think, is what we're trying to do in the leadership program with Nadia. We're trying to replace the problematic bit of humanness with a machine and allow space for human-to-human conversation between people and with their managers. So Nadia will take over some of the basic tooling and some of the space for reflection, and then leaders will do the rest.
I mean, this idea of AI being more closer to being a human, I mean, Diane mentioned it, thinking fast, thinking slow. Interesting that you brought that up. It was one of the pieces that I was able to talk to Jeffrey Hinton about, how can we take that analogy and apply that to LLMs, and how do we help them think slow, because it's hard for us to, but they're able to do so with the size and the scale. Tim, you talked about 4 different dimensions, and saw your eyes light up at that 4th dimension or sort of 4th pillar of what's possible. What are some of the steps that Delta's taking to do the kind of experiments that we've been talking about today, and something that also feels pretty high stakes?
Sure. Well, we're really preparing for the future in 2 ways. One, as we all know, in the digital age, data is the oil of the digital age. We've heard that for quite a long time now. I think there's a new dimension to that with the age of AI, and that's reward signal. That's another really, really important thing. The machines, as they're initially trained on the data, will present a prediction. They need to be aligned with the culture of your company and so on. And that's really where these signals come in. So to the degree that, in our case, a hiring manager is engaging with a prediction on what a particular skill may need be for a particular job, they can evaluate that. They can give it 4-star, thumbs up, thumbs down, or maybe the initial prediction had 100 words in it and they changed 50 of them. All of that is signal that is really, really important to improving the quality of the prediction down the road. So what we're doing now to prepare for the future is really focusing on that data. So we're building some applications that will capture the initial prediction the machine made, store it, take the next value, that the preferred value that the human provided, put that into a relational database as well, generate transactions so that ultimately those input-output pairs, those comparatives, they can be used to train the machines. And everything we're building, we're really thinking about how we can keep that signal. We think it's going to be a strong competitive advantage over time. This technology, unlike anything else we've seen before, which traditionally you purchase it and then 5 to 6 years later it's depreciated and its value does this. I think Brent, who showed that sort of hockey stick, it nearly goes vertical with some of these things. As long as you're capturing signal and you've got good quality data, the value of these assets are going to be extraordinary. And I think I wouldn't be going too far on a limb to think at some point you'll see, even from a Wall Street perspective, evaluating the quality of these capabilities that you have within your organization. How do you value these assets? Like in our case, we're building things that know all the skills that we need to run our business. What is the value of that on the asset sheet as opposed to what you traditionally have with a lot of technology? So brave new world coming up. And so, but to answer your question, it's really focusing on the data, making sure that we're capturing signal, making sure people understand the value of that to prepare for the future.
Wonderful. Jennifer, you talked 2 years ago. I mean, you were an early adopter, 22,000. What are the experiments that you're running right now that are sort of in the 12 category that might explode a year from now?
We're focusing on things that are fairly turnkey, I would argue. So you talked about Copilot. We have a mini experiment, about 300 people that we've been studying very closely on Copilot 365. That's going to ramp to mostly 14,000 employees, I would think, within the next year. That's really just focusing in on core productivity and just early adoption. I think getting people accustomed and climbing that, optimism and agency ladder, so to speak. We also have a growing software and digital capability, AI capability within ADI. So we're introducing, obviously, GitHub Copilot and other coding assistants and things like that. That's really gonna, I think, drive enormous value. So in the next 12 months, it's around upskilling and readiness and listening, right? Because we always have to adapt. And I think Nadia is going to come in and be at like kind of the the softer edge of it's not just about productivity, but it's about your performance. It's about a little more personable, perhaps, than maybe kind of driving the productivity dimension so hard. So I'm really excited to see I think it was the first 5 days, we got 1,600 people to opt in. We do have plans to continue to scale out Nadia even beyond the 1,600. But we want to study and learn so that we're going to make it even better for people for the next wave.
I mean, it's funny, we hear Diane Gerson talking about, the delight, and we want to make Nadia delightful, and we want to make it a great experience, but we also want to make it a Trojan horse for productivity. Like, we want to help people be better and faster at their job.
Well, and people want to be better and faster.
They want to be better. They want that. That's what they're excited about. Lesley, what about for you? Are there any experiments? Like, you and I have had a lot of chats about sort of the agile mindset in HR, and it's obviously working with the results that you're getting and the recognition. What are some of the experiments that are most exciting for you these days?
Yeah, as an organization, we've been using AI for the last couple of years. So for new product development, it's super exciting. For driving financial inclusion and equal access to products, that gets me really excited. In the people space, for productivity, for the front end, of our systems, and in our leadership offerings, we built something called the Leader Exchange, which is our own program, which has AI built into it for search and dashboarding. But it's this space, really. I think it's in the space that I really think Nadia can do that other forms of AI can't do right now, which is replicate the human dynamic, but remove some of that problematic areas of human dynamic. I think I've been thinking a lot about the hockey stick. This is going to be, I think, a much shorter period of time before we get up into the turn. And then the thing we're really working hard at is how do we create the conditions in the organization and the skills in our people in HR and in the wider organization to constantly see what might be coming around the corner, to understand how do we quickly respond. So paying as much attention to that skill set as to the actual experiment and the technology that comes at us.
And I think that mindset is just so crucial. It's sort of try to look around the corner, try to pay attention from every level of the organization. And then I just really love the reinforcement of the idea of experiments. I mean, that's how we are going to learn in a world that's changing so quickly. Preferably measurable experiments, as we've all talked about. And it's been wonderful to have you share your experiences with the group today. So thank you all, and thank you for flying from, none of these are New Yorkers today. They might have New York roots at some point, but they've all traveled to get here. So thanks, Tim. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Lesley.